What would you do if the most feared man in Dubai turned out to be the one who stole your innocence? Yasmin was just 18 when her eyes met those of Sheikh Rami. Cold, unattainable, passionate as the desert. One night was enough to change everything. He took her purity and then disappeared, but couldn't forget her. Days later, he secretly protected her, watched over her, cared for her. And when he returned, he asked a question that changed everything. Yasmin was the only woman capable of melting the ice that covered his soul, and a passion so deep ignited between them that even the desert bloomed. Subscribe to the channel and immerse yourself in this story where the emotionless Sheikh surrendered to the only woman who taught him to beat and love. They say the most dangerous men are not those who shout or bang on tables, but those who are silent when everyone else is talking. Rami, the most feared Sheikh in Dubai, didn't need to raise his voice to command respect. His gaze, cold and calculating in his decisions, and the way his presence made others sit up straight in their chairs were enough. He didn't need love and didn't want it. He only trusted numbers. Until one girl, 18 years old, with eyes full of innocence, entered his world to set everything ablaze. Rami, a 33-year-old man, as attractive as he was unattainable. His fortune was the subject of conversations in the most exclusive clubs, private dinners, and corridors of power. He owned lands, companies, and shares on international exchanges, but his main weapon was his mind, intelligent, ruthless, and cunning. So, when one of his partners tried to convince him to invest in a new project, a luxury brand, he immediately noticed the cracks. The project was unprofitable, without a future, and behind the beautiful promises lay numbers that didn't add up. "I'm not interested in investing in broken dreams," Rami said in a dry voice, placing the leather portfolio on the marble table. "I don't have time to lose them." The partner, a man with a fake smile and sweet words, hid his disappointment behind a glass of wine, but inside, he seethed with anger. He had been trying to profit from the Sheikh for years, but all doors seemed closed until an idea came that couldn't fail: to use a woman to ensnare him. Rami never appeared with anyone in his closest circles. Rumors circulated that he sometimes hired women for fleeting encounters. All discreetly, without feelings, without obligations. He didn't get involved. But what if this time it was different? What if the woman turned out to be so pure and special that even his frozen heart would waver? Then he remembered a merchant he had ruined years ago. He had cheated him with fake contracts, stripped him of his business, but the poor man still believed he owed him money. Rami held him in such submission that one call from him was enough to make him tremble. But what interested him most was the man's daughter, Yasmin, a girl of unusual, calm, almost unreal beauty, 18 years old, with soft lips and eyes that spoke without words. And most importantly, a virgin, untouched, perfect prey. "I have a proposal," the partner told Yasmin one afternoon as she returned from the market in a simple dress with shoulders covered by ribosomes. "Your father owes me money, but I am willing to forgive the debt if you do something very simple." Yasmin frowned. Her father was already old, tired, with a bent back from long years of work. What debt could she pay off in such a way? "Just dance for the Sheikh one time," the man smiled, as if knowing he had the situation under control. "Dance?" Yasmin wondered. "But I don't know how to dance and I don't feel comfortable doing it." He sighed theatrically and nodded towards the shop where her father worked. "Look at him, Yasmin. Don't you think he's worked enough? If you do this, I will forgive the debt, and he can finally rest." These words struck her like a truth she didn't want to hear. Her father had always been kind to her. He taught her to read when others said it wasn't worth wasting time on a girl's education. He never laid a hand on her, despite hunger and hardship. Yasmin swallowed, looked at the floor, then at the sky, as if seeking a sign. "I agree," she said in a trembling voice, but with two conditions. "Speak, beauty," he replied, feigning benevolence. "I need 2 weeks of dance lessons, and on the day of the performance, I will only dance. The Sheikh cannot touch me or ask for anything more." The man smiled, but the smile was crooked, not reaching his eyes. Of course, Yasmin only agreed to this. For the next 14 days, she attended a small dance school, learning quickly, but not to impress the Sheikh, but to do everything well, fulfill the conditions, and get out of this. But while her body learned to move gracefully, her mind filled with doubts. Who was this powerful man, and why was he interested in a simple dance? They say the most dangerous gifts are those that come wrapped in empty promises and broken bonds of friendship. And that night, Sheikh Rami, accustomed to controlling every aspect of his life with cold precision, received a gift that questioned everything he thought he had under control. The ambitious partner with a fake gaze and a slight smile appeared in his office with a glass of wine and the look of a satisfied man. "I've prepared something special for you, Rami," he said solemnly, as if offering pure gold. "A small gift in honor of all these years of doing business together." Rami raised an eyebrow, not smiling, with an expression that mixed distrust and boredom. "Why are you giving me a gift?" he asked dryly. The partner shrugged. "Because I know that sometimes you like to escape, spend a night away from the world with a beautiful woman." Rami's eyes turned cold. "I'm not interested," he interrupted sharply. But the partner didn't give up, knowing he had an ace up his sleeve. "Her beauty will surprise you," he paused, carefully choosing his words. "And she's an excellent dancer." There was an awkward silence. Rami lowered his gaze to the glass, thought, and then coldly and calculatingly asked, "If I agree, will you leave me alone with these empty projects you stubbornly try to show me?" The partner smiled. "Yes, I promise." Rami didn't answer immediately, but in his head he had already made a decision. Simple, but for others, it meant the beginning of a forbidden romance, a romantic secret that would turn his world upside down. The next day, Yasmin received a large box wrapped in golden fabric. Inside were luxurious Arabian outfits, hand-embroidered in deep red and golden hues, clothes that didn't belong to her world. There was also money for a taxi and a letter with clear and direct text. "Come at exactly 8:00 p.m. Don't ask questions, don't say anything, just dance." Yasmin read these words several times, feeling her stomach clench, but her thoughts returned to the image of her father, sitting in an old chair with tired eyes and cracked hands. She squeezed the letter in her hands, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "I just need to dance, and the debt will be paid." The Sheikh's mansion was impressive, quiet, like a modern castle that seemed to float above a sea of marble. Yasmin got out of the taxi and was met by a man in a black suit with a serious face and an inscrutable gaze. "Please follow me," he said without a word. They walked through long corridors, lit by low lamps, adorned with old paintings, and the echo of their footsteps resonated across the polished mosaics. But something about the path seemed strange to Yasmin. They weren't heading to the main hall. Instead, they went up a carpeted staircase leading to a private wing of the mansion, to the bedrooms. Yasmin's heart beat faster. She felt cold sweat on the back of her neck, but she remembered the conditions. Only a dance, nothing more. When they reached a large carved wooden door, the butler looked at her for a moment, said nothing, just opened the door. "Enter," he whispered. Yasmin walked in, the door quietly closed behind her. The master suite was enormous, with wall-to-wall windows overlooking the night city. Distant lights twinkled like stars. And in the center stood a tall male figure with broad shoulders and an imposing posture, silently watching the landscape, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Rami didn't turn immediately, but when he did, time seemed to slow down. The glass clinked as it was placed on the marble countertop. His eyes met hers, and he didn't blink. He had never seen anything like it. Yasmin in that red dress, elegantly clinging to her figure, innocent, with large eyes full of uncertainty. She was like a vision from a dream or a sweet nightmare. She had that beauty that doesn't shout, doesn't try hard to be noticed. A beauty that gently strikes and stays in memory. Rami looked at her as if trying to decipher who she was and why her presence so unsettled him. He, who had never allowed a woman to get closer to him than an emotional distance, suddenly felt something unknown, as if his world had shifted just a centimeter, enough to throw him off balance. Yasmin, nervous but determined, swallowed and, before he could utter a word, began to move. It was a soft, almost shy dansonade, the dance of a professional dancer or an inexperienced courtesan, but something more honest and pure. Each step was a silent plea not to judge her. Each movement was an open letter, telling of sacrifices and restrained fear. Rami couldn't take his eyes off her. He had seen many dancers before, some flawless, others extravagant, but none like her. The room felt heavy with stillness, as if time had paused just for them. Yasmin turned gracefully, her arms raised, her hips moving with quiet strength. Though her eyes never met his directly, her presence radiated something deeper, a story untold, a longing unspoken, and a fragile soul bound by unseen threads. Rami said nothing, but inside him, something stirred. It wasn't desire in the usual sense. It was curiosity, admiration, something deeper and unfamiliar. He watched, captivated. Her dance wasn't polished. It was real. Every movement, every soft breath revealed more of her truth than words ever could. When she stopped, the silence that followed felt like a closing door he didn't want shut. He longed to ask her 100 questions, Shanaim, her dreams, what she thought about at night, but he had spent years building walls around himself. Emotions were dangerous, and he had learned long ago not to give in to them. Still, something inside him wouldn't stay silent. He stepped forward, slowly, and gently leaned down. Yasmin tensed, surprised, but didn't step away. She had never been kissed before, but somehow this moment felt like it had always been meant to happen. At first, the touch was light tentative and uncertain, but something warm grew between them, something honest and powerful. Rami's arms wrapped around her as he pulled her close, and for a moment, the world disappeared. His kiss was filled with intensity, but also reverence, like he was discovering something lost. Yasmin responded, unsure at first, but then letting herself be guided by feeling. She stopped thinking. She simply allowed herself to be. He lifted her with unexpected care and laid her gently on the bed. Their bodies spoke a language neither of them had ever learned, but somehow always knew. There was no urgency, just connection each touch, unspoken reassurance, each kiss a quiet promise. It was not just passion, but the beginning of something fragile and real. Time blurred, and for a moment the universe felt still. When it was over, they stayed close, hearts racing, breaths shallow. Rami remained beside her for a long moment. Then, suddenly overwhelmed, he stood and walked to the window. He poured himself a drink, more to steady his nerves than from thirst. When he turned, something caught his eye. The bedsheets, a soft red stain. His breath caught, and the glass trembled in his hand. He looked at Yasmin, who now sat quietly, wrapped in the sheet, her eyes uncertain. "Were you?" he asked softly. Yasmin lowered her gaze. Her cheeks flushed. She said nothing. The silence between them was heavy, but not empty. In it lived all the feelings they didn't yet know how to name. "Yes, I was a virgin," she said softly, almost a whisper, then barely looked up and added, "I know I was just supposed to dance and go home. That was the agreement. But the way you looked at me, how you kissed me, how you touched me all of it, affected me. And I surrendered." Her words fell like stones on the Sheikh's heart. Yasmin lowered her head again, shy, feeling that perhaps she had done wrong by saying this. Perhaps it had disappointed him. But Rami was too confused to pretend to be indifferent. "Weren't you a girl?" he began. "Were you a prostitute?" he asked, not understanding what he had just discovered. Yasmin looked at him with a mixture of confusion and pain. "No," she replied firmly, though her voice still trembled. "I'm only 18. I'm the daughter of a simple merchant. I study and help my father in the shop. I've never been with anyone, never kissed anyone until today." Yasmin's words pierced his heart. His gaze darkened. Suppressed rage boiled within him. This damned hypocrite, who called himself a friend, used her, gave a young, innocent girl away like merchandise. He took her purity, stained her honor, set a trap, and Rami fell into it. He felt anger, guilt, and something deeper, sharp pain of remorse. He took 2 steps back, took a deep breath, and in a dry, firm voice, without looking her in the eyes, said, "Get dressed. The driver will take you home." Without waiting for a reply, he turned on his heels and left the room, leaving Yasmin alone with a broken heart. She remained sitting on the bed, paralyzed for a few seconds, trying to comprehend what had happened. That was it. It was over. She had given her body, her first night, her whole soul to something that seemed so special, so unique. But for him, apparently, it was just a mistake. She slowly got up, dressed with trembling hands, and left the mansion with a broken heart, not knowing that the Sheikh was not as cold as he seemed. Rami stood on the terrace, pacing back and forth under the night sky. He couldn't sit still, frowning, clenching his teeth, his heart pounding as if he had just returned from battle. "Calm down, Rami," he told himself. "You can't keep thinking about her. You don't have the right." He gripped the whiskey glass in his fingers but didn't drink. "She's beyond your reach. You are cold, cruel, undeserving of an angel by your side." He stopped, looking at the horizon, closed his eyes. But even with his eyes closed, he only saw Yasmin, her lips, her eyes, and heard her trembling voice. Yes, I was a virgin, and it tore him apart inside. Days passed, and Sheikh Rami tried to convince himself that everything was under control. He traveled to Doha, then to Paris, signed multi-million-dollar contracts, attended official dinners, and even allowed himself to be accompanied by a European model whose scent didn't even remain in his memory. But nothing helped. Every city, every drink, every moment was a futile attempt to erase the memory of one night. A night that was not just desire, but something deeper than he had ever experienced before. Yasmin. Her name echoed in his thoughts like a prayer and a sentence. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her embarrassed, trembling, confessing her innocence, and it haunted him. Rami was not a man who ignored his impulses, so he secretly ordered his team to investigate the girl's life without informing her. He began to unravel every thread of her story. It turned out that Yasmin's mother had died when she was an infant, and her father, Farid, had raised her alone, with difficulty and dedication, until Yasmin was 17 years old. Her life was quiet. She lived in a cozy house, studied at a private school, took piano lessons, and dreamed of becoming a composer one day. But everything changed in her last year of school. Her father's business collapsed without explanation. Debts accumulated. They lost their home and moved to a much more modest neighborhood. Yasmin had to quit her piano lessons and start working in the shop to help the family. Rami frowned. Something wasn't adding up. He ordered his personal secretary to check the bankruptcy documents, the movements on the partners' accounts, and the contracts. He wanted to leave nothing to chance. And then he saw it. His cursed friend partner, the very one who had presented Yasmin to him as a plaything for the night, had manipulated Farid's company's ledgers. He had cheated him, stolen everything, ruined an honest man for his own gain. This was the last straw. Rami went to meet him and, finding him in his luxurious office, said with anger in his eyes, "I knew you were a traitor, but I didn't think you were also a blight, destroying lives." The partner tried to remain calm, but the tension was obvious. "What does that mean, Rami? Are you going to give Yasmin's father back double what you stole?" He approached without fear. "Or I will turn you in, and if I suffer because I am your partner, I don't care. I'm going to hell with you." The man's eyes widened in surprise upon hearing Yasmin's name. "Is all this because of a simple woman?" he said contemptuously. Rami didn't let him answer. With one punch to the jaw, he knocked him to the floor. He fell stunned, with blood at the corners of his lips. "Don't you dare open that filthy mouth and speak about Yasmin again." The sheikh growled with the burning gaze of a predator and, without saying another word, turned and left. A week later, Rami received news. His partner, overcome with fear, had transferred the stolen money with interest to Farid. Yasmin and her father moved to a much better house. She started taking piano lessons again. A smile returned to her face, and her father slept peacefully for the first time in a long time. Rami sighed with relief. He hadn't done it for redemption or remorse. He did it because he couldn't bear the thought of Yasmin's suffering. But still, something inside him wouldn't settle. Justice had been restored, but his heart remained anxious, captivated by that night, that kiss, that gaze. Though he tried to deny it, he missed Yasmin and knew that since that night, he was no longer the same man he used to be. Rami tried with all his might to keep his distance, to be strong and not look back. But every day without her was a silent torture, and every night the same memory repeated itself. Her warm skin under his hands, her trembling voice saying, "Yes." Her gaze full of surprise, desire, surrender, and love. He tried to lie to himself, but he knew the truth. He desired her, needed her, and, worst of all, loved her. So, after another sleepless night, he made a decision. At dawn, he called his personal driver, the same one who had taken Yasmin home that night. "Take her home after her piano lesson," he ordered. "Tell her I want to talk to her, but don't insist if she doesn't want to come." But she agreed because Yasmin had also spent every night thinking about him, about his kisses, his body, his cold words, and that moment when she felt she meant something to him. When the car drove her to the mansion, her heart pounded heavily. She entered, walking with trembling but determined steps. And when she saw him, standing in the garden among the shadows of the cypress trees with a serious face and eyes burning like embers, she realized that nothing in the world could have prepared her for this. He greeted her with a slight nod of his head. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly, but firmly. They silently walked to a table surrounded by white flowers. The scent of jasmine hung in the air, as if nature itself was holding its breath. and then he spoke. Yasmin, I know I made a mistake that night. I shouldn't have taken your innocence, he said in his cold tone, the only one he seemed to know. So I want to correct that mistake. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out a small blue velvet box. He opened it. Inside, a diamond ring sparkled like a promise. Will you marry me, Yasmin? Yasmin blinked, feeling the world stop for a second. The air became thick. She didn't answer. He frowned, as if the word yes didn't exist in his vocabulary, as if no woman would dare. I was never a mistake to be corrected, she said firmly. Her voice trembled, but her heart didn't. I don't want to be with someone who marries me out of pity. I accept your apology, but now I need to leave. She resolutely turned to leave, but he gently took her hand. That light touch pierced her skin like lightning, made her tremble, and in him, desire flared like an unquenchable fire. Wait, he whispered. I expressed myself incorrectly. I don't know how to handle emotions. I never needed to until you came along. She hesitated to move, as if her body knew she was about to hear something important. I don't want to marry you out of obligation, he continued. I just want to protect and care for you, but it's hard to do that from afar. Yasmin swallowed, feeling her heart pound like a drum. You were the one who exposed my father's partner, weren't you? She asked softly, but bravely. You secretly looked after me all these days we didn't see each other. He looked at her in silence, wanted to deny, wanted to pretend it wasn't true, but couldn't. Yes, he finally admitted. Then Yasmin smiled gently and said, If that means you will take care of me and treat me as a real wife, not out of obligation, I agree. For a moment, time seemed to stop, and, for the first time, Sheikh Rami smiled. It wasn't the cynical smile of power or satisfaction, but a smile of relief, tenderness, and gratitude. The smile of a man who had finally found something stronger than his own darkness. No one expected this. Even those closest to Sheikh Rami couldn't imagine that this formidable and respected man would announce his marriage, and to a simple stranger, without a noble name or fortune. But he did it. There were no lavish invitations or endless lists of businessmen and princes. Rami didn't want a ceremony full of ostentation. He simply wanted her to be there in a white dress and walk towards him with that gaze that completely disarmed him. The day came. The sky was clear. The golden sun illuminated the hills of the Sheikh's palace, and the gardens were covered with white roses, lilies, and jasmine, as if nature itself knew that this day was special. Yasmin, dressed in a delicate ivory gown hand-embroidered with pale gold threads, walked with trembling but confident steps. Her veil was so light that it swayed in the wind like an invisible caress. She was ready to give herself to the man who, unwittingly, stole her innocence and, unknowingly, conquered her love. Rami awaited her, standing in a traditional sand-colored suit with a black cloak draped over his shoulders. His serious face barely concealed an inner struggle, but when he saw her approaching, with shining eyes, rosy cheeks, and trembling lips, his heart squeezed like never before. She was not just a woman, she was his woman, the only one who made him feel human, the only one who awakened in him the desire to be better. You are beautiful, he whispered as she approached. The ceremony began with a simple blessing prayer. The vows were short but sincere. When the ring touched Yasmin's finger, something inside Rami broke. The walls, the armor of his indifference that he had built for years. Because looking at her, he realized that he could no longer be the same. She entered his life like a whisper, and now she was a hurricane of light, sweeping away everything in her path. I accept, he said in a deep voice. I accept, she replied. Her eyes were full of emotion. When they were declared husband and wife, the world seemed to stop. Rami held her tightly but gently and kissed her not like the first time, consumed by passion, but now with love, surrender, and promise. Few guests applauded. Jasmine petals fell from the sky, thrown by servants from the balconies. The floral scent mixed with the smell of Yasmin's skin as Rami pressed her to his chest, as if unwilling to let her go. That night was different, without haste or doubts. Only love. Two souls who, against all odds, found each other. The room was half in shadow. Yasmin's veil lay on a carved wooden chair. The flowers of the bouquet seemed to hold their breath. Rami quietly closed the door behind them. Their steps were slow, but their eyes burned. She stood before him in a white satin robe, barely covering her shoulders. The belt trembled with each of her nervous breaths. You are perfect, he whispered, as if afraid to break the spell. He approached and took her face in both hands, as if holding a sacred gift. His lips touched hers. Barely a touch, but enough to make Yasmin close her eyes and exhale the air she had held for hours. The kiss was slow, deep, full of restrained tenderness. He gently untied the belt of her robe, allowing the satin to glide over her skin like warm water. There was no rush, no greed, only reverence that made her tremble. Rami looked at her as if she were a work of art, every curve, every birthmark, every inch of her skin like a blessing he didn't deserve. With his lips and hands, he began to explore her. From her collarbones to the inside of her wrists, from her neck to the delicate curve of her back. He kissed her calmly, as if time had ceased to exist. "You have no idea how beautiful you are," he whispered in her ear in a husky voice. Yasmin felt her skin burn. Her body ceased to belong to her. She surrendered to this warmth, this overwhelming passion, the new sensation of being loved with her whole being. Her fingers intertwined as he gently laid her on the pristine white sheets. He took his time. Every touch was a gift. Every kiss, a silent poem. Yasmin reached out to him, seeking, desiring, surrendering not only her body, but also her soul. Rami received her with the same intensity. Their bodies merged, as if made for each other. Breaths mingled, the world disappeared. Only they remained, and the love that, unwittingly, saved them. And when they reached the climax of this sacred connection together, there were no cries or words, only a deep sigh, a shared heartbeat, a silence that spoke of everything. Rami finally hugged her tightly, pressed her to his chest, as if afraid she would disappear. For the first time, he didn't feel alone. The next morning, soft sunlight timidly filtered through the white linen curtains. Yasmin slept with her head on Rami's chest, and he silently watched her with a serene expression that few had ever seen on his face. His breathing was even. Her eyelashes barely trembled. And at that moment, Rami realized that he would never be the same again. He lowered his gaze to her hand, resting on his heart, and, so no one would see, with no witnesses, he gently kissed it. He said nothing. There was no need. His soul had already spoken for him all night. The following days were like a fresh breeze after a storm. Yasmin filled the mansion with music, laughter, and flowers. She played the piano again, and Rami, who used to hate extra noise, stopped every time he heard her play, as if every note awakened something dormant within him. She, in turn, discovered a new man by her side. Behind the coldness of his voice lay tenderness, behind his silenced thoughts of her, and behind his dark eyes the promise of a protected, safe, and deeply loved life. One day, walking in the garden, Yasmin stopped. "Rami," she whispered. "Yes, my life," he replied. "Do you think they say the desert has no soul?" She continued. "That it's dry, inhospitable, lonely. But I believe that when it's given love, even the most arid desert can come alive." He smiled. "And you gave me love?" Yasmin said, looking at him tenderly. "I only watered what was already inside you. You just needed someone to believe in you." Rami took her face and kissed her as if the world were ending at that very moment, and neither mistakes, nor the past, nor agreements mattered, because from that moment on, he was no longer a lonely man, and she was no longer a forgotten girl of fate. They were two souls who, against all odds, found each other. And as night falls on Dubai, rumors circulate among the palace servants that one can still hear the gentle sounds of a piano and the laughter of a young woman, free and happy. And from the highest terrace, the Sheikh, who was once cold, gazes at the stars, holding his greatest treasure in his arms. Thus, the desert bloomed. If you have read this far, I invite you to leave one word in the comments: blossom. That way, I'll know you're one of those who made it to the end, who feels and understands that even in the desert, love can blossom. What part of the story did you like the most? Where are you listening to me from? Write about it in the comments. I'll be happy to read you. Like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories. See you in the next episode.